Hello, this is Candy with eyes2jesus.blogspot.com, and welcome as I do a review of the CEB Women's Bible. CEB is the translation or the Bible version, and that stands for the Common English Bible. In case you're unfamiliar, the CEB translation is a very well done translation. Probably the most gender accurate, gender correct translation available. And I don't say gender inclusive because that carries connotations of liberality and of changing the word of God. It's not that. It's gender accurate and gender correct, following the Hebrew and the Greek. So, the Common English Bible, Women's Bible, or the CEB Women's Bible, from what I've seen available, is hardcover and a leather-like. The hardcover is the easier one to get. You can get it on Amazon. I got mine for $22, but I've seen the price fluctuate up to the mid-30s, which is still a good price. But I see the price going up and down. So here's the hardcover one. And you can see the hardcover one is gorgeous. So I have the leather-like, which is the one that I use. But if I couldn't get the leather-like, I would be totally happy with the hardcover one. When I see the price is lower, I usually buy these in multiple quantities because this Bible is so good, I give these away. So the last person I gave it to, I was happy to give it to my pastor, and she thinks it's pretty awesome. So, I am in the leather-like version, so that's the version I'll be showing in this video, and that is this one. Now, I decorated it because I thought it was just a little plain looking. So this is called Decotone Leather-like, so it's got this nice accent here on the front and the back. That came on it. I added a couple of stickers because I thought the cover was just a bit plain. And the hardcover, of course, doesn't come with ribbon markers, as hardcover Bibles usually don't. This one came with one, pretty standard, so I added a second one. So mine has 2 ribbon markers because I added a second one. And the page edges, like the hardcover, the page edges came white. I don't mind white page edges so much on hardcovers, but when it's leather or leather-like, I prefer my page edges not to be white, but they came white, so I just decorated them. I just drew on here with flare markers. Not a big deal. This is something that I did when I was relaxing and watching a documentary on TV, and I thought, might as well keep my hands busy, so I just decorated this with my old flare markers that were starting to dry out. They were left over from when I was homeschooling my children. They are all graduated, so I needed some use for my grading markers, so that was a good use for it. So I am going to change the angle so we can get more of a top-down view, and I'm going to show you this amazing Bible. All right, so here we got a top-down view. We have the beautiful hardcover up here, and then we have this one, the leather-like decotone that I'm going to show here. So the front matter in here is pretty good. Instead of a presentation page, it's just a page with blank lines. I like that better because not all of us want to always do presented to, for the occasion, on this date, etc. So by having the blank lines here, you can put whatever you want here. You can put in your name. You can make a little family tree of your name and your children and your children's children. You could put in a favorite verse, a poem, or whatever you'd like. So I like that it doesn't designate what you have to put on those lines. You have your title pages here at the front. Okay. And your table of contents, of course. The editorial board. This is awesome because every single person in the editorial board is a woman. And, I mean, this is a woman's Bible, so that makes sense. The contributors, multiple pages here of contributors. And every single contributor in here is a woman. Now, that should be a no-brainer, right? Because it's a women's Bible. But you might be shocked if you look at the contributors and editorial board. Almost every single woman's Bible is all, most, or some men. And that's strange because could you imagine a man having a man's Bible, a Bible for men, and the editorial board and the contributors consisted also of women for men's Bible. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? And yet that's what happens with women's Bibles. We have male editors and male contributors. Well, I want a woman's Bible that's for women, that has the notes and everything written by women. And so that's what you have in here. The only other women's Bible I know of for sure that is like that is the Every Woman's Bible put out by Tyndale Publishing. So that's also a fabulous Bible. I have a review of that Bible as well in my Bible Reviews playlist on my YouTube channel at Eyes to Jesus. So here we have the preface to the CEB Women's Bible and the preface to the CEB translation. I suggest you read both of those. They are quite informative. You have abbreviations here. You have measures. And then you got another title page. Then you have this pretty page for Old Testament. Then, of course, similar for the New Testament, except it's going to say New Testament. And then the book introductions, they're not really divided up into timelines or dates. They may or may not give the proposed date of the writing, the proposed author. They do tend to give some background and some good information on the book. They are worth reading. So there is that. And then just turning here, this page here, Genesis chapter 1, this is a perfect page to show you the layout of how this Bible works. So this is called a woman's Bible. So is it a women's devotional Bible? Is it a women's study Bible? Is it just a pretty women's Bible, right? What kind is it? I would consider this to be a women's study Bible. Light, but really well done. Now, most Bibles, when they have study notes in them, will have the scriptures at the top, and then at the bottom we have the notes, right? That's not the layout of the CEB Women's Bible. The notes and the information are written first, before the chapter. Now, sometimes they're written for part of the chapter, and then partway through the chapter they have more of these, and then the rest of the chapter, etc. So it'll tell you, like these notes here, it says they go from Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. So what I like to do when I'm in this Bible is I like to read the notes first, and then I read the section. And then you have little sidebars of articles here and there, which are fabulous. So here we have one on reproduction. Also in the Bible, as we turn here, these are kind of biographical things. We have something here on Rachel, and we have something here on Leah. So the biographical ones are not shaded, but they kind of have this semi-outline here. So it's easy to tell the difference between the notes, the biographical, and the articles. So that's pretty fabulous there. So then, speaking of these articles, which is really handy, flipping back over here into Genesis chapter 2, we have an article here about creation. By the way, a side note, if you're not finding the information you're looking for in the notes before the chapter, for example, it could be in a biography sketch, or it's very often in the articles. So, for example, here I wanted to read you this part of this article on creation because it's fabulous, all right? It says, in the first account, God created the humans to work together, sharing God's image, even as they were differentiated, Genesis 1:27. In the second, God created a human first, and the human became differentiated as a man only when God created a woman. The Hebrew word God gives to describe the woman means helper. No hierarchy is implied here, as the same word is used to describe God's relationship with humans. So I like how it points it out with helper, which is a Hebrew word azer, and most of the time when the Hebrew word azer is used in the Old Testament, it's of God helping or rescuing his people. So that's the type of helper is that the wife is to her husband, the kind that she is there to rescue him if he needs it. She's a warrior helper, not a subservient slave. But also, I like how it pointed this out. I was actually just noticing this yesterday or the day before when I was reading through some of the creation account in Genesis 1 and 2 in the Hebrew. And in the Hebrew, I clearly noticed this, that God created a human first. Most Bibles will continue saying man here, but it's actually the Hebrew word for human. And it doesn't actually start using the Hebrew word for man until Eve is created. So that is something that I think would be worthy of more study. So then we flip over here to Psalm chapter 68. And let's take a quick look at 68 verse 11. And the Common English Bible translation says, "My Lord gives a command. Many messengers are bringing the good news." Now, if you look at that in the NIV 2011, it has it more accurately. It talks about it's women messengers bringing the good news. The CEB translation doesn't have that. However, the notes here do bring that out a bit. It says, Psalm 68 is full of the imagery of war, so it may be surprising that this psalm portrays women more than almost any other psalm. Yet in the ancient world, women announced the victors in battle with celebratory dancing, singing, and drumming. It's probably this association that stands behind the heralds who bring God's tidings. 68:11, designated as female in the original Hebrew, as well as the women playing hand drums in procession between singers and musicians. 68:25. The association of women with war takes an ironic turn in imagery in verse 12, where it says, "The women back home divide the spoil," unaware that the leaders of their armies have turned back in defeat. So, the translation doesn't have the word female or women in there, but at least it brings it out in the notes a little bit. So I thought that was worth showing. Okay, and then for some more Old Testament, Daniel. Again, this is more of a problem here with the translation. It says, "A river of fire flowed out from his presence. Thousands upon thousands served him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood ready to serve him." That ready there should be before, not ready to serve him. This is actually, if you study it out in the context, it's the Great White Throne Judgment, and this has given us the statistical number of how many people in the history of humanity choose to receive Christ. And when you run the numbers, move it to a percentage, that's 1%. So when Jesus says, "Wide is a path to destruction, but narrow is a path that leads to life, and few there be that find it," that's not very much hyperbole, is it? Anyways, there's no notes on that. And then the other thing I checked here, verse 13 in Daniel chapter 7, "As I continued to watch this night vision of mine, I suddenly saw one like a human being coming with the heavenly clouds. He came to the Ancient One and was presented before him." I love how it says one like a human being. Most Bible translations will say one like the Son of Man, but it means a human being here. And see, there's not really notes on that here, but this translation is great how it translates it. In the New Testament, it calls Jesus not the Son of Man, it calls him the human one, which is more accurate because in the Hebrew it literally means child of humanity. And Jesus, whenever he calls himself the human one or Son of Man, he's actually recalling the Jews back to this verse, which shows that he's recalling himself back to deity, because culturally they believed that only deity rode clouds. And here we have the human one riding clouds. So no notes there, but just wanted to spotlight something with the translation. Now, Acts chapter 16. If you're following along with my Acts study, we just did Acts chapter 16, and that's where we learn about Lydia. So I wanted to actually read you this note, this biographical note that they have on Lydia, because it is very well done. It says, "Although Lydia appears only briefly and is only one speaking line, she played a prominent part in the early church. As a Gentile God worshiper, she had gathered at the place of prayer with other women who already worshipped the God of Israel. Lydia adopted Christianity and started the first church on the European continent in the city of Philippi. She formed this church in her house with her family members and perhaps women who worshipped with her on the riverbank. Lydia, a successful businesswoman, used her financial and leadership gifts for the church. Her story parallels that of powerful men in Acts, the God-fearing centurion Cornelius in Acts 10, the synagogue official Crispus in Acts 18:8. She is the head of her home, and when she converts, so does the rest of her household. In the Philippian church, Lydia sets the stage for ministerial leadership that includes women as equals, indicated later by Euodia and Syntyche serving among the church's co-leaders. So, and then if you want to read about the church leader women, Euodia and Syntyche, that's in Philippians 4. chapter 4, verses 2 through 3. So I thought the note there was fabulous. If you want to learn more about this, I talk about Lydia quite a bit in my Acts chapter 16 study. So a good little biographical there that I thought was really good. Here's something that I'm impressed with, because not a lot of study Bibles point this out. It gets glossed past. If you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 11, it says, "My brothers and sisters, Chloe's people gave me some information about you, that you're fighting with each other." People gloss right over that simple verse. But here in the notes it gives it for the chapter, it says, "It's important to note the leader Chloe," chapter 1, verse 11. One of the reasons Paul even knows about the divisions in Corinth is that Chloe has sent her people to inform him. Her people. She appears to be a financially independent leader of the church at Corinth. No male is mentioned in association with her. People like to jump on and say Stephanus was a leader of the church at Corinth. It looks like Chloe was, or they both had separate house churches. So I was impressed and pleased that it had that note on that. Okay, moving on to more New Testament things. 1 Corinthians 11 didn't really have a very stellar or really good notes. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, not too bad. Let's see. On some of the notes it says, "Many have noticed a discrepancy between Paul's acknowledgement that women pray and prophesy and worship and his command for women to keep silent when the community gathers for worship. A number of possibilities have been offered to explain this discrepancy. Could the women have been conversing during worship? Did they have many questions because they were uneducated? Were they imitating unseemly behavior as prophetesses in other religions? Some have suggested that the contradiction is so great that Paul could not have said this. Some later scribe must have inserted this command." And there is some possible evidence showing that these two verses 34 and 35 in 1 Corinthians 14, might have actually been added. However, I'm currently going with the view, it's not mentioned here. It is mentioned in every women's Bible, which is fabulous. And that view being that Paul quotes a lot of people in his letters, especially in 1 Corinthians. And, there were no quotation marks in the Greek. So the original recipients would have known when he was quoting, because it was fresh on their minds and it was in their culture. And these two verses, verses 34 and 35, seem to be Paul quoting Cato the elder. And then starting in verse 36, he's actually rebuking that. Like the Revised Standard Version said, "What? Did the word of God come only to you?" He's actually rebuking that and standing up for women speaking in the church. They don't give that view, but they do give some views here which were pretty good. Move on to my next little marker here. Okay, so on Ephesians chapter 5, like on 1 Corinthians 11, doesn't really get into source theology, which I believe is the correct theology, that the symbolic word head, both in 1 Corinthians 11 and Ephesians chapter 5, is referring to source and origins and not to authority. Now, the Every Woman's Bible gets into that, and I applaud that. I think that's great. However, just a nod of yes to the Common English Bible translation. The paragraph begins at verse 15, called "Be filled with the Spirit," and goes to the rest of the chapter, keeping verses 21 and 22 together, where it says, "And submit to each other out of respect for Christ. For example, wives should submit to their husbands as if to the Lord." Verse 21 says what type of submission it is. It's a mutual submission. So I like how the Common English Bible doesn't create a paragraph break there. Some Bibles deceptively create a paragraph break between verses 21 and 22. And you're creating a paragraph break right in the middle of a thought where it's talking about the same thing. So that can create issues. All right, 1 Timothy chapter 2. Not really any notes on verses 11 and 12, probably because the Common English Bible actually has them translated way more closer to the Greek than almost any other Bible translation, so there really wasn't any need of notes. It says, "A wife should learn quietly with complete submission. I don't allow a wife to teach or to control her husband. Instead, she should be peaceful." Now, they could have got into how this was cultural and it was just for this church in Ephesus, and that there was actually problems with women going to the Artemis temple and then trying to bring their husbands with them. That's a cultural background. It doesn't get into that. Would have been cool if they did, but doesn't really get into that very much. Now, here is something, though, absolutely fabulous. Okay. Now, first of all, this is a nod of very, very good to the CEB Common English Bible. It's one of only 2 translations that I know of that correctly does not add to the Word of God by inserting male pronouns such as he in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1, where it's giving the information, the qualifications, if you will, for pastors and deacons in churches. If your Bible translation has he in there, that's incorrect. There is no he in these passages in the Greek. It is entirely gender neutral. And notice it says, if anyone has a goal to be if anyone. That's literally in the Greek. It's not if a man or if a male person. It's if anyone. Most Bible translations will say anyone or whoever or whosoever or similar, which is correct. But then they'll start adding male pronouns when they describe this. Those male pronouns are not in the Greek manuscripts, so they need to stop adding them to the Bible. It's causing confusion. Now, a lot of people will jump at that they think it's male. Says they should be faithful to their spouse. Some Bibles translate that the husband of one wife, but faithful to their spouse is actually the more accurate translation. And the note here, absolutely fabulous. It says the word translated as spouse here in 3:12, here and 3:12 is literally wife, leading some readers to interpret this passage as endorsing only male leadership. In Greek, however, the default perspective was from the male perspective. The female perspective would be assumed in the general sense, much as we have traditionally used the word mankind to mean men and women. Spouse captures the more general sense of the Greek. We know women served as leaders in the early church. With that in mind, this chapter then reads as advice for all those who take on the special responsibility of leading the faith community. That's fabulous, because faithful to their spouse or husband of one wife is a Greek idiom which means to be sexually pure. And like it says, Greek is a masculine language, so when it's addressing a group of mixed genders, it always says it from the masculine. So then it would say, so the literal Greek is a one-woman man. Being addressed to a mixed group also means the women understood it as a one-man woman. Just like, even in the 10 Commandments, don't covet your wife. It's also understood that means don't covet your neighbor's wife. It's also understood that the wives are therefore not to covet their neighbor's husband. Or Jesus teaches on the Sermon on the Mount that men are not to lust after women. It's also understood that it also means women are not to lust after men. So same thing here. So that's why they say faithful to their spouse, because English is not a patriarchal language like Greek was. So when we are addressing a crowd of both men and women, we would therefore say more gender neutral terms. So faithful to their spouse is more how we would say in English, and that's what they mean when they said it in the Greek, but they said it from a male perspective because mixed groups were always addressed from the male terms. But you'll see the same term in the reverse in 1 Timothy chapter 5, where it's addressing only women. When it's addressing only women, they will flip it. But when it's addressing men and women, it's always addressed from the male perspective. So it kind of gives us an inkling of that here in the note. So I thought that was actually a really good note. All right, and then I wanted to finish off the brunt of this by going to 2 John, where it says, to the chosen gentlewoman and her children. That's who it's addressed to. Now, I wanted to show you this in the book introduction. I'm so glad that they have this. It says, this letter was probably written around 100 CE by an unnamed elder who belongs to the same stream of Christianity as the Gospel of John. The phrase identifying the addressee, eklekte Kyria, may refer to a church leader named Kyria, which means lady, or eklekta, which means chosen. If either word is a proper name, it indicates female leadership in the church. And the Young's Literal Translation actually has this to Kyria and her children, and I believe that is correct. Kyria was a very, very common name back then. So it's likely that 2 John was actually being addressed to a woman church leader and her children who are with her in her household, in her church. And in fact, if you were to say that it's symbolic here then you have a contradiction, because in the third epistle of John, it's the exact same way. To my dear friend Gaius. If you compare the greetings on 2nd John with 3rd John, they're the exact same greetings. You just plug in a different name. So if it's symbolic here, then what's Gaius symbolic for in the third epistle of John? We know he was a real person. So is Curia. All right, so I have seen some Bible translations call her Eclecta, but I believe it is actually Curia. So I like how they had that there in the book introduction. So flipping to some back matter, there's so much back matter here. I mean, a lot of useful stuff. So I'm just going to show you the index of contents instead of flipping through it all. So you have an index of named women, an index of unnamed women. These are great, okay? An index of the articles in here in alphabetical order, an index of the articles in canonical order, a discussion and reflection question, so you can use this in like ladies' Bible study at church. That'd be fabulous. 1 month Bible overview reading plan, New Testament in 90 days reading plan, Bible in 1 year reading plan, and then a map index and lots of maps in the back. And then after that, back here, this is where I wrote down my personal corrections here, that I made corrections in this Bible. So this section here and then this section here are just general things I made corrections in. And then this is where I corrected the dead Rephaim. I don't know if you know what that means. If you don't, you're probably not into studying that anyways. I have corrections of Sheol, Hades, and Tartarus here, where often they will just say grave or dead instead. And then I have a dot next to all the places for Sheol and Hades where they actually called it grave instead of synonyms for Sheol and Hades. So I just have those in here. These are the changes I made in the text for my own personal study. So and here's what the back looks like. The back is untouched. I didn't put any stickers there. And then there's the spine. So do I recommend this Bible to women? Oh my goodness, absolutely. Frankly, I think if women had the CEB Women's Bible and the Every Women's Bible put out by Tyndale Publishing, those are two fabulous, amazing Bibles for women that I do recommend. Have a blessed day.